Let's see who has a bad case of dumbass in this episode of Dolphins in Depth. It is the weekend. We are preparing for a Jets home game. Joining me is Barry Jackson. And Barry, we definitely have to start this show with something that sat under my just got my panties all in a bunch, Barry. Nick Saban, who South Florida absolutely loves and adores, as he adores us as well. He came out today on the Pat McAfee show on ESPN and basically just explained, hey, you can't take every NFL job because some of them aren't good NFL jobs. Some of them you're set up for failure, and basically justified his decision of taking the Miami Dolphins job as he had a bad case of dumbass. Obviously, Barry, I want your response to the Nick Saban comments.
Well, he clearly enjoys working for Vrbo or Airbnb or whoever the hell he makes those funny ads for more than he liked the Dolphins. But it's funny, almost 20 years later, he's saying, you know what, I shouldn't have done it. We were $17 million over the cap, which was a lot in those days. He told Pat McAfee, we had the oldest team in the league. They were 4-12, had no quarterback. I'm thinking I'm going to make it right. Well, we had a winning season and we couldn't get it turned around. There were so many obstacles and no draft picks because they gave them all away for Ricky Williams. And then he ended, Omar, with this advice to Belichick as he talks to UNC and to every other college coach: do your research in taking an NFL job regardless of how pretty the city is. You can't really argue with anything that he said, but at the same time, Wayne Huizenga gave him a lot of money. And I know he's been appreciative to Huizenga, may he rest in peace, but I don't know why at this point he's complaining about a situation that really wasn't quite as bad as he makes it sound. It was still an attractive NFL franchise. They had been competitive a few years earlier with Wanstead as coach. So I don't think it was as bad as he makes it out to be. And obviously, the decision ultimately to go with Culpepper over Breeze was his fault, even though the doctors advised it. He could have overruled it. He was given total control. He picked the wrong guy. So instead of laying the blame on the doctors, and I know how he's gotten away with that for 20 years, just say, I picked the wrong quarterback. Medical people steered me the other way. I should have just trusted my gut. So it seems like now.
What about the Aaron Rodgers whiff? I mean, we're looking at a Hall of Famer, a guy arguably the best quarterback in the NFL. You have the second pick in the NFL draft, and you pick a running back in Ronnie Brown.
Exactly.
You're crying about Ricky Williams, all these draft picks. Last I checked, you didn't lose any draft picks when you were selecting. I'm looking at the draft during your tenure, and you had
Jason Allen. Jason Allen in the first round. No one should have known college football players more than Nick Saban, and he screwed it up. How about that?
Jason, don't forget about Derek Higgins in the third round. In the second round pick, you traded for Dante Culpepper. Do not blame your bad quarterback situation on anybody else in the organization. That was on you.
Exactly. And H. Wayne, rest his soul, gave you everything you wanted. So don't start complaining now. I don't want to hear it.
Yeah. This is just, I get the point that he's making, but he's putting out the narrative or the perception that, hey, this Dolphins isn't a good job. Wasn't a good job when I took it. And more than likely, depending on how you feel about Tua Tagovailoa, if there are changes to be made, and that's still, we got 5 games to determine what's going to happen. And I don't think anybody, including Mike McDaniel, is canceling anything out in terms of this absolutely won't happen. But the way he's painting the narrative, you would make it seem or think that he's saying that the Dolphins are not a good job.
Yeah, it's clearly a good job. If it opened up now, it would be a top half of the league attractive job because you have an owner who pays to the cap and gives you everything you need. He's got a first-class facility. Ross, to his credit, has created a situation where players like to play here because they know the facilities are first class. They know they'll be treated in a first-class way. So it would be an attractive job if it opened. I don't think, and I know you share this opinion as well, McDaniel's obviously at no risk. He rescued Tua. He made the playoffs his first 2 years. The only question heading down the stretch,
we can lose 4 or 5. We can lose 4 or 5. Right. Things can go absolutely left.
I don't see any scenario where.
Who expected Adam Gase in his final month?
Any scenario where McDaniel's at risk.
Yeah. Who expected Adam Gase in his final month to have lost the locker room and players not want to play for him anymore. I didn't expect that, in 2015. Oh, no, what year was that? 2018. So you never know what's going to happen. I think NFL, what I've learned is NFL locker rooms are fragile places. And one thing, I forget what it was. There was one single incident that happened where Gase blamed something on the players, a leader player, and that created a domino effect. It was a Minnesota loss. I forget what he did, but from that point, players were like, oh, no, we're done with this dude.
Yeah, it was a blowout loss in Minnesota that year where they lost 3 straight late. Remember, McDaniel is inexorably tied to his quarterback, and Tua they're committed to because of the contract and because he's obviously played well since a concussion. So that creates a unique set of circumstances for McDaniel. As long as Tua is playing well and productive and the offense is pretty good, I think McDaniel will always be here. He has that safety net that Adam Gase and most coaches don't have, where you are so tied to the quarterback and you are justifiably given credit for rescuing the quarterback from mediocrity. So I think that gives him a longer leash than most coaches have. I think there's no chance McDaniel's not back. Grier, I expect him to be back. I suppose there's a small chance that Ross could make a change if he reads all of our stuff and realizes all the mistakes that have been made. But at the same time, you also can say, well, Grier has built a roster that's gotten into the playoffs the last 2 years. They were without their edge rushers. So you could make a case, some might say excuses, for Grier. And Ross continues to seem to fall along that line of thinking where he only looks at the good things that Grier has done, plus obviously has a personal affection for him. So I would expect Grier back next year. I suppose it's possible he could be let go if they unravel, but Grier has enough reasons / excuses to give Steve Ross for why it didn't work out this year. Mike thought that Skylar Thompson would be better as a backup. We didn't expect we'd lose Jalen Phillips, right? So he can point to all these things and telling Steve Ross, here's why I deserve to stay for another year, plus remind him that they made the playoffs the last 2 years. Right. So I wouldn't think these last 5 games are going to be monumental in terms of determining anything with the Dolphins. And frankly, they probably shouldn't be. We know their deficiencies. We both pointed it out. Offensive line, defensive line. They have a slew of issues on defense that have to be fixed this offseason. But I still hold out some hope because McCaffrey for San Francisco out for the year. They lost their number 2 running back. That's a very winnable game in 2 weeks. You should be able to beat the Jets twice. They stink. They're going nowhere. Probably half of them are thinking about going to the Bahamas. And then at Cleveland, even though Winston obviously is capable of snippets of greatness, he's also capable of big mistakes like we saw with the 2 pick sixes. So to me, their season will come down to at Houston a week from Sunday. If they can win that game and win out, I think they make the playoffs because I don't think the Broncos are going to go 3-1 with their remaining schedule. They have difficult games. If the Dolphins win out, I see Denver losing twice and the Dolphins making the playoffs, assuming the Colts also lose. So I'm not ready to give up on this season.
Hold on, Barry. You're making it sound like this is a layup here, not a 12-foot or 16-foot jumper that this Dolphins team. Let's not act like they don't slip up at bad times and bad opportunities. And I get it. Arizona and the Colts are both playoff caliber teams. Fans will add them to the list of tough opponents that Tua and the Dolphins cannot beat now, with winning records. I hate that narrative, by the way, Barry, because it doesn't factor in where the team is or what they look like or how they're playing when you played them. It only factors in the end results, which can cobble in, I'm sorry, but the last time I checked the Jacksonville Jaguars, they were a playoff caliber team when the Dolphins played them in the season opener. Everybody thought they were going to make the playoffs. They didn't know they bottomed out. When the Dolphins played the Rams and beat the Rams were one of the hottest teams in the NFL. They were on a 3-game winning streak. The tide was turning, and that was a good Dolphins victory on the road against a good opponent. But you know what? The record is it's 1-15. It is what it is. Let's not fight the record. As Eric Studsville, not Eric Studsville, the tight end coach,
John Emery
says,
if the shoe fits, wear it. We got to wear it.
Yeah, hey, you got to wear it. But we talked about you're right. You made a very great point earlier in the show, Barry. We came into this season saying the trenches, these lines were deficiency areas, and voila, here we are. You didn't do enough in the offseason to improve those areas. Now we're getting to this critical stretch in the season. You got injuries on the defensive line. Injuries on the offensive line. You're old on the defensive line. Both units, I would argue, are struggling at this point. You got to get better. And we'll see how this defense plays. Speaking of the offensive line, Kendall Lamb is a go with the elbow. He's not even listed as a questionable on the injury report. Teron Armstead lives in his questionable status, but Barry, we know Teron is playing. Kendall Fuller has not cleared concussion protocol, but he's right at the doorstep. We expect him to be cleared by Sunday's game. What injuries, if any, concern you about this week's game?
Nothing really. Kader Kohu looks like he's going to play, so they'll have their top three corners back with Ramsey, Fuller, and Kohu. Anthony Walker, it looks like he's going to be able to play. The hamstring kept him out only a week. As you noted, when the injury happened against New England, Anthony Walker was crying on the field. I asked him about that this week. He said he was so worried he had torn it. And he said, plus, I'm just so frustrated about having injury after injury in my career. So fortunately, he's okay. He's going to play. I want to mention something to you about the trenches that we both brought up on this show. I seldom feel envy. But last night, sitting watching that Detroit-Green Bay game, I look at that Detroit running game, and I felt a little envious. I'm saying to myself, this used to be the Dolphins with Mostert with the outside zone. Why can't they do it anymore? And we know Detroit has a much better offensive line, but why can't the Dolphins run the ball like the Lions do? And then we start thinking, well, is it personnel? So a couple of things from this week. When I asked McDaniel on Monday, could there be personnel changes in terms of more Raheem Mostert, who has a hip injury, more Jeff Wilson, who told us this week he really wants to play. He told that to me and Hal Habib that he wouldn't discuss with McDaniel him not playing, but he feels like he obviously can help. So I asked Isaiah Wynn this week. I said, do you have any indication that they're giving you a chance at left guard, maybe a rotation with Rob Jones? He said, if that's their plan, he's not aware of it. He said, I've only taken second-team snaps. And also, he's still on the injury report with the knee and quad issues that are lingering from his long stay on PUP. So I don't know that personnel changes seem likely on the offensive line, but I think a case could be made at running back to give the ball to Jeff Wilson, especially goal line. As we said on the show earlier this week, when you think toughness on this roster, one guy who comes to mind is Jeff Wilson. So he deserves a chance at the goal line. So I think you could see some personnel changes there, but it's interesting. McDaniel wouldn't rule him out, and he said, obviously, I'm not going to tip our hand to the Jets. But knowing that McDaniel's made changes this year, it tells me maybe something is brewing just to change the dynamics of the running game. Now, you got an interesting answer this week about 6 offensive linemen from Frank Smith, because I love that idea. Why don't they go to a 6 offensive lineman package on the goal line? And he said what?
It was interesting. I don't know if it was accurate or fair or address the issue. The problem that I've had with the goal line struggles, and I believe it was C.K. Parrott who put out statistics that basically said the Dolphins are the worst in the NFL. I believe it was the last 2 years in short yardage.
3 years.
Last 3 years.
Especially with third and short running plays.
Yes, we know this. Now, Frank Smith has really kind of blamed it on their running style, and they are an outside zone running team. Now, I will play on that by saying, hey, your outside zone's been shut down. So what's going on there? They don't have the power, the oomph to push through on those short yardage situations. And they certainly don't have quarterbacks to run the quarterback sneak, even though Tyler Stoop-Huntley, I personally believe he is elevated over Skylar Thompson because he might be able to help you with these quarterback sneaks. He's more of an athletic quarterback. He's more of a runner. But the not trying different things, not working different things. And the explanation from Smack Smith was, they are a 2 tight end team. So they regularly play in the 2 tight end packages. So that is their base offense. But let's not pretend like the tight ends are actually blocking well or doing
No.
a good.
Julian Hill did earlier this season, but to me, he's clearly regressed as a blocker the last month. You can see it with your eyes. I asked Frank Smith, has there been a big diminishment in Julian Hill? He wasn't going to admit yes, but you can see they're not getting the quality of blocking from tight ends, which they did initially this season, which is what earned Julian Hill some playing time. I'm not going to be surprised now if they replace both blocking tight ends. Obviously, Smythe is very much in danger. He's been marginalized this year. You can have cap savings with him. But Julian Hill, I don't think has done enough to be their inline blocking tight end without question next year. I think they need help there. And by the way, at receiver, their blocking, except for Waddle, has been substandard this year. And it was very telling that last week, Tyreek Hill was removed for Malik Washington on the goal line downs where they had second and goal at the 1. Tyreek Hill, as everyone knows, was out of the game for all of those snaps. Malik Washington was in. They're the same weight. Malik is 2 inches shorter. So even though Frank Smith said they wanted to go their big package, obviously having Malik Washington block instead of Tyreek Hill has nothing to do with size, right? So that to me was a message. Tyreek, your blocking has to be better.
But they praised Tyreek for his blocking, Barry. So I call BS on that. They praised Tyreek for his blocking all season. They've shown clips. They've made a NFL Films cut up of Tyreek blocking. Like let's cut the bull crap. Like let's. I don't know what's going on with Tyreek. I think injuries and age and durability. Tyreek sits out 1 practice per week, which is basically the standing theme for 30-year-olds on this team. When you build a team full of old players, this is what happens. But I'm sorry. If I'm an opposing defensive coordinator and I see Malik Washington out on the field as opposed to Tyreek Hill, I'm applauding. I'm thanking you. Yeah. I'm appreciative. Now that's one less thing I got to worry about. So it was dumb, and I commend Tyreek, even though you know how I feel about Tyreek. Tyreek just likes attention. Tyreek is going to say whatever he needs to say to get the desired attention. People aren't paying attention to me this week. Let me do something crazy. Let me say something crazy. Let me get a headline. You had a baby this week, Tyreek. Enjoy the baby. But I don't blame him for saying, and you covered this in your story, and you were there, so maybe you can elaborate on this, that he had a problem with the fact that he wasn't on the field. And as a competitor, and I'm sure Mike McDaniel understands how a competitor thinks, he was probably okay with that. And maybe if Mike McDaniel had to reconsider all of these things that have gone on, he's probably saying to himself, yeah, I probably should have had Tyreek on the field. Your take to Tyreek not being on the field in that goal to go situation that they failed in.
He's got to play some of those downs. You can't have him out of the series for all 4 downs. So I asked him about it today. To Tyreek's credit, I think he's comported himself really well all season. He hasn't gone off about the lack of deep throws, about his diminished stats, about any of these things. He said, as a teammate, you understand personnel and certain things coaches are looking for. This was in regard to him not playing on the goal line in the 4th quarter against Green Bay. But he said, as an individual, as a competitor, it sucks. So he said, yes, I had a conversation with Mike McDaniel about it. He said, I understand where they're coming from. He said, a younger Tyreek, quote, would have been hot about that. I would have been cussing someone out on the sideline. I probably would have been on Twitter talking trash, saying, get me out of here. But, and this I found interesting, and this is a sign that even though we laugh sometimes when Tyreek says he's matured, Omar, this was a real-life example of where he has matured. He said, if I'm being very outspoken, if I'm being a diva about not getting the ball, about not being in the game, those other guys on the team are going to see it and be a reflection of who I am and say to themselves, if Reek can do it, I can do it too. I don't want to bring that kind of negative attention inside of our locker room. So I commend Tyreek for saying that. And his actions have been his words this year. He has not gone off to the best of anyone's knowledge. I asked him about frustration about not getting deep balls. He said they're going to come in time. He said, if you look at the defense we're playing against, guys just aren't allowing a deep shot against the Dolphins. He said defenses are falling in love with playing cover 2 defense against us. He said that defenses don't care about nothing else, don't care about the run game. They just want to top 10. They just want to stop 10-17. Obviously, referring to himself and Waddle Omar. So he's handled all of this maturely. But the question that I have for you is this. If we get to the end of the year and we don't see successful deep ball attempts or even the effort made,
Yep.
Does it bother you at all, or are you of the feeling that if they're
No.
successful dinking and dunking, it's fine?
No, it does bother me. You have what, the 19th offense in the NFL right now? You've been top 5, top number 1 last year, number 6 the year before. Teams, yes, there is more of a commitment to cover 2. Teams, it's like a jar. It's literally like a jar. Teams are putting the lid on the jar. They don't care what happens inside the jar, but they put the lid on the jar. But you know what, Barry? I don't blame anybody for what's going on outside of the run game. If you make teams pay with the run game, which they did last season, then it takes the jar off the lid. And then it takes the lid off the jar. And their run game right now is so inept, so inconsistent, so inefficient that teams don't worry about it. You are literally averaging 2.96 yards per carry for the last month. And now people would ask, well, why is that? I've looked into it. I've studied the film. The only common thread is the loss of Austin Jackson. That's the only underlining common thread. Now, Austin Jackson, maybe he makes the outside zone work on the right. Or we can say maybe Teron Armstead's injuries are contributing to the outside zone not work, and it has worked on the left. We had one, and then they got penalized for it against Green Bay. And when you look at the film and the cut-up, even though Teron Armstead played his worst game last week, Teron is still 20 yards downfield doing his job. Right. Now, on a consistent basis. I hate to do this, but I'm going to have to blame a lot of it on Devon Achane and the change in the approach of the offense.
Interesting.
Because if you're going to take everything underneath, here's why I say blame it on Devon Achane. One, I don't think he's as good as an outside zone runner as Raheem Mostert is. And yes, you talked today with Mike McDaniel, and there are other factors, and maybe the hip and maybe preserving Raheem. There are other factors to why Raheem has been limited for such a duration of time this season. You know where I sit on this conversation, Barry. I think Raheem is your best runner.
Yes. He's got to play 10 carries in 4 weeks. 10 carries in 4 weeks, Omar, not enough for a guy who's a career 5.1 yards per carry guy, scored 21 touchdowns last year. He's got to run the ball more. And the Jets, remember, have a below-average run defense that's been well below expectations. They're 20th against the run. There's no reason why they shouldn't run successfully against a 3-9 team that's diminished defensively, doesn't have their one all-pro player in Sauce Gardner. So they should run the ball Sunday. And if they don't,
without their inside linebacker and C.J. Mosley.
Exactly, right. Who's been hurt all season. He's out again on Sunday. 2.96 yards per carry, as you've noted, is what the Dolphins have averaged in their running game the last 4 weeks. That cannot continue. Your Achane point is interesting about him not being as good an outside zone runner as Mostert. I would say the guard blocking has diminished as well. Eichenberg and Rob Jones, again, I know the Pro Football Focus metrics are kind of polarizing, but if you look at them, Eichenberg and Jones are clearly your 2 worst run blockers on the offensive line, and that's killing you. We talked about Julian Hill's blocking not quite as good, and as you said, there have been some plays where Achane just hasn't hit the hole quickly enough. The question is, do you give Jalen Wright or Wilson any snaps, or would you allocate them only between Mostert and Achane?
I'm a Mostert and Achane guy. I know Raheem can get the job done. I know you scored 21 touchdowns in one season. I think he should be the red zone back. I think he should be the goal to go back. I'm sorry, you can't score 21 touchdowns in one season and then you're running a red zone play with your smallest back. I mean, a goal line play, goal to go play with your smallest back. I'm sorry, I just don't like it.
It's crazy.
Yeah. Yes, we can blame some of this on the guard play. I would say the guard play has taken down. If it was at volume 7 when they were rushing for 150 yards for a good stretch of the season, it's gone down to about the volume 5 right now. And this is what happens in December games. It is what it is. Liam Eichenberg's playing with a shoulder harness. Rob Jones is battling some injuries. This is part of what happens in December football. The question is, do you have a counter for it? And right now, while they did activate Isaiah Wynn, I'm not sure that they're ready or willing to insert him into the starting lineup at any point. And It is what it is. But I will say this. If this team doesn't start running the ball efficiently and effectively, you can not only forget the playoffs, but you're not going to get to a winning record, in my opinion. Let's deal with the edge rushers. It was who came back, as Mike called them. What did he say they were? The
window guys.
Window guys. Yes.
As the fans know, you have a 21-day window if you're on PUP or on IR to practice. At the end of those 21 days, the team must either activate you or you're out for the rest of the season. Obviously, if you're designated to return, you're going to be brought back. So we will see Bradley Chubb. We will see Cameron Good. Today was day 3 of their 21-day window. I think next week would be a realistic target for both. McDaniel wouldn't rule out either playing Sunday. Both are listed as questionable, but it would seem unlikely. All, or both of them, I should say, were limited in practice this week. When is a good time to bring back Chubb in your mind? And what can he give you over the last month, do you think, after not playing since December 31st?
You know what, Barry? Here's how I'm going to answer your question. What are we waiting for? Other than your fear, if he plays and he suffers a setback, oh well, what do we lose? Right now, when you lost Tyson Bowser, you're down one edge rusher. My choices are a Bradley Chubb, who's had 1 week of practice, or Muhammad Kamara, who clearly is not ready or capable of doing what I need him to do or doing the job. I'm sorry. I want my team to have that extra oomph. I want them to have that extra motivation. I want them to have more meaning to this game. And are you telling me that Bradley Chubb in a Dolphins uniform isn't going to add a little bit of extra juice, even if he plays 10 plays, Barry? Even if we give him a preseason run at this thing, are you telling me that that's not going to add some extra juice to this Dolphins team, to this Dolphins defense? You know,
yes. And Chubb also, Omar, I want to make this point. Besides the pass rushing skills that he gives you, he's your best turnover creator on defense, and that's an area where they've been sorely lacking. Chubb has a unique skill to knock the ball, to chop the ball out of other players' hands. Dolphins this year have 4 fumble recoveries. Only the Jaguars, Saints, and Raiders have fewer. And Breece Hall comes to town on Sunday with 6 fumbles this year. Only Ramondre Stevenson has as many fumbles among NFL running backs. So Chubb helps you not only with the pass rush, but if he were playing on Sunday, he's the ideal person to chop the ball out of Breece Hall's hands because Breece Hall has been fumble prone. Now Hall's probably unlikely to play on Sunday because of an injury. He's listed as doubtful. But my point is the Dolphins haven't had nearly as many takeaways as they should this year, both interceptions and fumble recoveries. And I think Chubb's absence certainly has been a big factor in that. And we know they emphasize it, right? Anthony Weaver told us that they do 1,000 reps in training camp of chopping the ball out. Javon Holland is good at that at times. He did that in the Jacksonville game, but there hasn't been nearly enough of that.
No fumble recoveries, no interceptions. Right. No sacks. I mean, I believe the Falcons have fewer sacks than the Miami Dolphins. So, correct. And still, Weaver's defense has been good. I don't know where they are right now. I believe last I looked, they were top 10. I don't know, Barry, where they are right now. You probably do.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to sit here and say that Anthony Weaver's defense hasn't been good, but there aren't any splash plays. Now, imagine if you found a way to add some splash plays. Imagine if you found a way to add some turnovers. Imagine if you found a way to create more pressure. I think that if you want to, yes, this isn't an absolute, we absolutely need Bradley Chubb situation. But if you wanted to inject a little bit of life into this defense, you put Bradley Chubb in a uniform. Even if he doesn't go out there and play on a consistent basis, or maybe you give him on a limited 15 snap count, you have him just play on third downs as a rusher, that's going to add a little bit of juice to this team. So that's where I stand on that situation. But I understand where Mike McDaniel is, where he errs on the side of caution when it comes to injuries.
Yes, and it's been like that for 3 years. By the way, they're 8th in yards allowed defensively, 14th in points allowed. Do you worry at all about the run defense? Obviously, Green Bay had the best game running-wise against the Dolphins in the last month. They ran for over 100 yards. I'm a little concerned because it's December. Calais is old, even though he's really good. Benito Jones is beat up, who's your only real natural nose tackle on the roster. So I would be concerned, especially going into cold weather games in Cleveland, Houston, obviously, where Mixon's had a terrific year. So I'd worry about the run defense as I have going back to August.
Absolutely. Quentin Bell is stepped into an elevated starting role. I like Quentin. I think he did great in training camp. There's a reason he hasn't played. There's a reason Tyson Bowser jumped over him drastically when he got here. You probably need to do better. Maybe this is probably his last week with Bradley Chubb coming off, because I do expect if Bradley Chubb doesn't play this week, he's probably going to play next week. You definitely need more there as in terms of the edge setting and in terms of run stuffing. But I also believe that has a lot to do with the inside linebacker. And so getting Anthony Walker Jr. back, that's going to help. But Barry, we've broken down this game. We've talked about the injuries. What is your prediction for Sunday's contest?
I think the Dolphins win, but we haven't mentioned the Jets' three most prominent players. Aaron Rodgers, obviously, who's had a disappointing year. He has 19 touchdowns, the 8 picks, but his passer rating is in the 20s, 73 passer rating against Seattle and a pick 6 last week. But he does have weapons with Devontae Adams and with Garrett Wilson. Wilson has caught 74 for 763. So my fear would be this. One of these weeks, and you see this with older stars, one of these weeks, the star is going to have one of those games that he's capable now once every 7 or 8 games that reminds you of why he is a star. So that's why, even though I expect the Dolphins to win Sunday, Omar, I'm not entirely convinced because you just feel like maybe Aaron Rodgers has something left in him. Kendall Fuller hasn't played in 3 weeks. He's got weapons with Wilson and with Adams. So that would be my concern. Even so, I'm going to say Dolphins 23, Jets 18.
Yeah,
a random 18.
I do get your concern, but I think I like the fact that Jalen Ramsey, and I have a piece that I'm writing for Sunday's Miami Herald where Jalen Ramsey was just very transparent and real with me, and hopefully it sort of paints and illustrates his mindset and his thought process as he pushes to get this team over the hump. Remember, Jalen Ramsey was the guy who talked about this Dolphins team being bullies. Well, they've fallen short of that bully mentality. But he's going to have his guys back. He's going to have Kendall Fuller. He's going to have Kader Kohu. And I don't worry so much about the passing game as more I do worry about the run game and worry about the Dolphins being able to run the damn ball. But hopefully they can sort of put it all together. I think they've learned from their mistakes against Green Bay. It's clearly not going to be cold, Barry. So I'm going to put it at 24. I'm going to go 24-14. I'm still waiting for this Dolphins team to put together a complete game. Let's hope that this is it and it sets them up for a big Houston showdown on the road in what I think is their toughest game of the remaining stretch of the season.
No question.
On that note, Dolphins in Depth, we will be back for you on Monday to recap what happened against the Jets. Everybody, Art Basel weekend, stay safe, be responsible. Traffic is crazy, so if you're going to be out on these streets, probably drive an Uber because it's crazy out there. On that note, we will see you on Monday.